I'm Olivia Carter. When I turned 35 at what was supposed to be the warmest birthday dinner of my life, my younger sister suddenly stood up, cradled her stomach, eyes welling with tears, and said in front of the entire family, "I'm sorry. I'm pregnant." It's Jake's. Jake, my husband, sat right next to me and didn't deny a thing. But what crushed me more than anything was when my mother placed her hand on my shoulder and whispered, "Olivia, men stumble sometimes. Learn to forgive, sweetheart." What would you do if, on your own birthday, the people closest to you became the ones who betrayed you, and your family asked you to stay silent for the sake of appearances? Would you forgive or would you stand up? If you've ever felt like the whole world turned its back on you, leave a comment below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel as I unravel what came next, because what I'm about to share only gets darker. I didn't leave the dinner table right away. I sat still, my hand wrapped tightly around an empty wine glass, lips trembling while my eyes stayed dry and unblinking. My mother looked at me as if I were a child ruining dinner, not the one just stabbed in the back by her entire family. Jake looked down, avoiding my gaze. Madison clutched her stomach, tears dropping onto her white dress. I could hear someone swallow, the clink of silverware on plates, and the soft music from the ceiling speakers playing on, as if nothing had happened. I don't remember exactly how I left. I just know that when I got home, I walked into the bathroom, locked the door, sat on the cold tile floor, and stared at myself in the mirror. 17 years of marriage, a life I once thought stable enough to last forever. And yet, I had become nothing more than something my mother had picked out on sale, placed in the perfect spot and ready to be replaced when convenient. My childhood was never peaceful. I grew up in a 2-story house in the suburbs of Portland, with white wooden eaves and a backyard full of old plum trees. My mother, Linda Walker, wasn't loud, but her words always landed like a sentence passed down. I remember vividly the day I was blamed for breaking her antique glass vase. I was only 8. Madison had just started preschool, her hands still sticky with chocolate ice cream. But my mother didn't ask questions, didn't investigate, didn't hesitate. She just looked at me and said, "You're the older sister. You take the blame. That's what being responsible means." Responsibility. That word haunted me all through my teenage years. I was the one doing the laundry, cleaning the kitchen, double-checking Madison's homework. Every time something went wrong in the house, my name was the first they called. My father died when I had just turned 15. A car accident on his way home from a late shift. I didn't cry when I heard the news. I stood in the hospital hallway, hand gripping my bag strap, ears ringing like I'd just been hit. Madison was in my mother's lap, held tight. I stood alone, the cold sinking into my bones. After Dad died, my mother became someone else. The hugs disappeared. The laughter gone. All that remained was calculation. She began mapping out my future like a project she had to manage. What subjects to take in high school, which major to pick in college, where to work, who to marry. Every choice treated like a chess move. Jake entered my life when I was 27. During a corporate dinner party my mother conveniently used to introduce a promising candidate. He was charming, polite, always knowing exactly how much to say to make someone feel safe. I was already working as a communications executive for a large real estate firm, and Jake, then running a small restaurant, seemed like a grounded man in a world full of noise. My mother smiled every time she saw us together, her eyes gleaming like she'd scored a winning investment. "Jake is different from the others," she once whispered to me. "He knows how to care. How to please. You need someone like that to balance out your logic-driven head." Truth is, I had doubts. Jake was elusive. Some weekends he vanished, claiming work events, chef collaborations, or industry dinners. I wasn't the interrogating type, but unease lingered. Every time I asked, my mother waved me off. "Don't be so suspicious. You always think the worst. Jake's a good man." Then Madison started coming over more often. She'd bring pastries, laugh loudly, praise Jake's cooking, compliment how lucky I was. Sometimes I saw them giggling in the kitchen, Madison's hand resting on Jake's shoulder a little too naturally. I once asked Jake directly and he laughed out loud, "Are you jealous of Madison? She's your sister." The truth is, Madison never really saw me as her sister. She was always the favorite, Mom's sweet little Maddie, the center of every family gathering. Me. I was the one who gave up her room when guests came over. The one who was never mentioned in holiday toasts because the older one doesn't need it. I used to tell myself I was grown, that I didn't need love from my mother or sister to validate my worth. I had a career, a marriage, a life. But everything I thought I built turned out to rest on foundations others had laid for me. And once those foundations crumbled, I fell hard. That night I lay in bed. I didn't cry. I didn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling, one question echoing inside me: how did I let it go this far? After that birthday dinner, no one had to explain anything. The way Jake stayed silent. The way Madison sobbed like a victim. The way my mother turned to me with that soft as silk voice laced with steel. She's fragile, Olivia. She needs Jake more than you do. That was enough to make me stop lying to myself. But honestly, if I had been honest sooner, maybe I would have seen all the signs. I was just too used to being pushed aside, too used to having my feelings dismissed with polished advice. I began to recall every little detail, every coincidence I once chose to believe was harmless. 3 weeks before the party, on a Saturday morning, I stopped by the coffee shop down the block to pick up a mobile order. As I walked in, I spotted Madison and Jake sitting by the window. They both laughed awkwardly when they saw me, like they'd been caught mid-joke. Jake stood quickly, pulled out a chair for me and said, "Just bumped into Madison here. Total coincidence." Madison smiled. "I was just grabbing a latte. Didn't expect to see him either. Small world, right?" I sat. I drank my coffee with them. I nodded, smiled, pretended to believe in coincidence. But inside, something buzzed, like a soft knock at the back of my neck, a warning I forced myself to silence. A week later, Jake said he needed to borrow my car because his SUV was in the shop. I thought nothing of it. But the next day, cleaning out the passenger seat, I found a jade green beaded bracelet. The kind I'd gifted Madison for her birthday 3 years ago. I remembered it clearly. It was the only gift she thanked me for in a direct text instead of the usual group message. I held it up to the light, turning it slowly. The stones were smooth, cool, just like the chill that crept into me when I realized what I was looking at. Jake didn't wear bracelets. He didn't even wear hats. No one else had used that car but him and me. I brought the bracelet into the kitchen, set it on the counter and called out, "Jake, do you know who left this in the car?" He walked out of the bedroom, drying his hands, squinting at the object. "That? No idea. Maybe someone you gave a ride to." I stared him down. "I didn't give anyone a ride. You drove the car yesterday." He paused for a moment, then gave a half smile. "Must have been Madison. I gave her a lift from yoga. Her back was sore, she couldn't drive." "You picked her up?" "Yeah. She called me. I was nearby, so I helped." I didn't reply. Just nodded, placed the bracelet in a drawer. But that night I didn't sleep. I lay with my back to him, eyes wide open, listening to his steady breathing and wondering, when did I start accepting answers like that? The following days I watched more carefully. No accusations. No confrontation. Just quiet observation. Madison started calling more often, always with some version of, "Are you home?" or "What time will you be back?" Subtle but precise. One day I told her I was at the office when I was actually parked just down the street. I saw Jake's car in the driveway. The door was open. A figure slipped out from the passenger seat. It was Madison. She wore Jake's hoodie, hair tied in a bun, and hurried to her own car like she was escaping something she didn't want seen. I backed my car up and drove away. I didn't want a confrontation. Not yet. I wanted to be sure. I brought all those scattered pieces home and started piecing them together like a dark puzzle I had once refused to see. Each detail was a cut. Averted eyes. A vague excuse. The lingering trace of Madison's perfume on Jake's shirt. A half-typed message that vanished the moment I approached him. And then came the birthday dinner. Madison's confession. Jake's shameful silence. My mother's eyes on me, as if I were the one making the situation more dramatic than necessary. "Olivia, you have to understand. Madison is fragile. She has no one. She needs someone like Jake to lean on." "And what about me?" I asked. "I'm not fragile." My mother pressed her lips together. "You're stronger. You know how to stand on your own. You don't need anyone." I let out a laugh. Soft, voiceless, not amused. Just a quiet laugh, because I had finally heard aloud what she had always thought. That I was born to endure and Madison was born to be forgiven. And in that moment I knew with absolute clarity, if I didn't protect myself, no one else ever would. The next morning I drove to Avery's office. A light rain painted streaks across the windshield, like it was trying to wash away every trace of the night before. But in my mind, every image remained sharp. Every word, every glance, every second of silence between Jake and Madison burned into my memory, impossible to erase. Avery was the only person I trusted now. We'd met in college, both studying communications, but she later switched to law. Fierce, sharp, and unwavering in her loyalty to truth. That's why I always called her the lighthouse in the fog. Her own family had once turned on her because she refused to live by their rules. So if anyone could understand what it felt like to be cast out of the place that was supposed to be safe, it was her. When I walked into her office, she was already at her desk, laptop glowing, steam rising from a cup of tea. She looked up at me from head to toe, didn't waste time with small talk. Just said softly, "You're finally here." I sat down, unwrapped my scarf, my voice low. "Jake betrayed me. With Madison. My mother knew. And told me to forgive them." Avery nodded like she had already predicted this. "Do you have proof?" "Right now, just instincts and scattered details. But there's enough that I can't look the other way anymore." She tilted her head. "Then we don't go to court." "Not yet. You need evidence the court will accept. Right now, they'll just see a heartbroken wife and a messy family." I clenched my fists, knuckles pale. "I want the full picture. Not just the cheating. I want to know what else he's hiding." Avery grabbed her notebook, flipped a few pages. "We'll break this into 2 tracks, personal and financial. On the personal side, I'll help you build a trail of evidence about the affair. Financially, we'll dig into shared assets, investment accounts, actual income, and anything Jake has been moving around behind your back. We might need to bring in a private investigator." I nodded. "I have the money. I just need someone discreet." Avery picked up her desk phone and dialed an internal number. "Rachel, get Thomas for me. Tell him it's urgent, clean file, high priority, personal financial investigation." While we waited, she looked at me seriously. "Olivia, you need to understand something. From here on out, you can't let anything show. No outbursts. No changes in routine. Act like you know nothing. I'm supposed to keep living next to someone who just stabbed me in the back? Not live, perform. If you can't, you'll lose everything. If Jake senses anything, he'll move the money before you can even react." The phone rang. Avery picked up, gave a brief confirmation, and hung up. "Thomas is on his way. In the meantime, tell me everything you've noticed." I took a long breath and started listing. Madison and Jake kept accidentally running into each other at coffee shops. I found her bracelet in my car. She'd been in my house when I wasn't home. Jake started coming home late without a clear reason. Madison would text me things like, "What time will you be home today?" As if she needed to make sure I wouldn't show up unexpectedly. Avery jotted everything down, her pen never stopping. "What about finances?" "Jake handles most of our family investments. When we first got married, he said he'd help with the shared accounts and investing in restaurant chains so I could focus on work. I trusted him. I haven't checked anything in years. But one time I noticed a large withdrawal I didn't authorize. He said it was working capital for the restaurant. Any documents to back that up?" "I haven't checked yet. But I have full access to our accounts. I'll start pulling the transaction history." Just then the office door opened. A tall man walked in, dressed in a dark shirt and long coat. Salt and pepper hair, piercing eyes behind thin glasses. Avery stood. "Thomas Avery. This is Olivia Carter." Thomas shook my hand, voice deep. "Heard you're looking for the truth." "I want the full truth," I said. "Even the parts I'm not ready for." He nodded. "Then I'll need a list of accounts, your husband's schedule, and anything you've collected, friends, business partners, extended family." I opened my bag and handed him a thick folder. Last year's bank statements, a scanned copy of our house purchase agreement, insurance paperwork, and screenshots of Jake's work calendar I had quietly compiled. Thomas flipped through it quickly, his brows furrowed. "There's a secondary account here that doesn't have your name. It's a business account but registered to your home address." Avery glanced at me, suspicion flickering in her eyes. "Do you know anything about this account?" I shook my head. "First time I'm seeing it." Thomas nodded slowly. "Well, we've got our starting point. I'll trace what he withdrew, where it went, and who co-owns it, if anyone." I looked him in the eye. Anything you need to warn me about? Just one thing, he said, calm and steady. Once you open this door, there's no going back. The truth always comes at a cost. I met his gaze. I've lived in the dark too long. I want to see everything now. One Monday morning, while Avery and I were reviewing my account statements in her office, Thomas walked in holding a thick file. He said nothing polite, no greetings. Just placed the file on the table, flipped open the first page and said, "You need to see this." I held my breath as I scanned the numbers. A repeating pattern of transactions over the past 7 months. Each time a few thousand, sometimes as much as 20,000. All withdrawn from my business account. The one I thought was only used for staff payments, vendors, and internal projects. Every single transfer had my name on the digital signature. A chill ran down my spine. I never authorized these. Thomas nodded. He used your e-signature template. You gave it to accounting a while ago, right? Yes, but only for internal contracts. Not for account access. Jake had it, Thomas said, pointing to a small line at the bottom of the system permissions sheet. You gave him power of attorney 3 years ago. Do you remember? I clenched my hands. He said it was just in case I was traveling. I never thought he'd abuse it. Avery looked at me, her voice calm but firm. And now he's withdrawn over $130,000 and funneled it into an investment fund under the name Madison Walker. What fund? Thomas opened another document. A luxury spa chain that just launched last month. It's called Evelyn Glow. Official owner, Madison. But the registered capital came from a shell company sharing the same address as your mother's former accounting office. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I remembered my mother casually mentioning a beauty venture for Madison, talking like it was a short-term plan, just something to help her gain independence. But no one ever told me about Evelyn Glow. No one ever mentioned that a massive sum had been drained from an account under my name to build it. Avery leaned closer and asked quietly, "Had you ever heard of it before?" I shook my head. Not once. Thomas continued. There's more. He pulled out a separate envelope and opened a set of documents printed from the court database. 3 years ago, Madison was arrested on suspicion of embezzling funds from a nonprofit organization called Hands of Hope in Santa Clarita. The case never went to trial. It was closed internally. But the preliminary investigation showed she withdrew more than $25,000 from the scholarship fund. My mouth fell open, but I couldn't say a word. The reason charges were never filed, Thomas said slowly, was because a third party negotiated a settlement, returned the full amount, and submitted a commitment for Madison to undergo therapy. Avery frowned. Who was the third party? Thomas handed her another sheet of paper. The signature read, Linda Walker. I braced myself against the table, trying not to collapse. My mother vouched for her. Covered it up. Not just that, Thomas added, his voice deepening. Your mother used her connections with the fund's director to have Madison's name removed from the official personnel records. On paper, she never worked there. I looked at Avery. They planned this. Jake, Madison, my mother. They were always one step ahead of me. Avery placed a hand on my shoulder, her gaze softening. No one's ahead of you, Olivia. They just exploited your trust. But from now on, we won't let them do that again. I sat in silence for a while, flipping through the pages, rereading every line. Bank transfers, scheduled appointments, emails sent from an address Jake had created specifically for this purpose. Each line cut deeper than the last. Jake hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. He had quietly dismantled every brick of the life I'd built over the last 10 years. And Madison, the sister who once stood at my birthday party pretending to apologize, had a history of theft, deceit, and cover-ups, all protected by my mother. I raised my head, my voice hoarse. He knew I was busy. He knew I didn't check the accounts. He took advantage of that. And my mother, she used the very title of mother to hide the truth. She knew I'd never suspect my sister. She placed me in the perfect position to be betrayed. Thomas gathered the files. This evidence is enough to pursue charges for asset misappropriation, forgery, and abuse of financial authority. But I think it goes even deeper. Avery nodded. We need to dig into hidden accounts, shell companies, and any asset transfers between your mother, Madison, and Jake. I stood up, took a deep breath. I want to know everything. I want the full picture beginning to end. For years I was told to be strong, to sacrifice, to forgive. Now I want to know exactly how much they took from me, and what they'll have to give back. Avery picked up the file and placed it in my hands. And you will get it all back. That afternoon, I came home earlier than usual. The house was quiet, golden light from the setting sun casting long shadows across the wooden floor. I didn't turn on the lights. I moved through the house like a shadow myself, drained after days of discoveries I never thought could get worse. I didn't feel like cooking or reviewing documents. I just wanted to lie down. But as I passed the living room, I froze. I heard my mother's voice from behind the partially closed door. At first, I assumed she was talking to Madison as usual. But then a name stopped me cold. Raymond, you can't keep calling like this. What if Olivia hears? I stood still, not moving. For a brief second I thought maybe I'd misheard. But then I heard a man's voice reply, deep and weary, I just want to know if she's okay. I have no other way to reach her. That was your choice from the beginning, my mother snapped. You chose your wife and kids. I told you to stay out of it. Olivia doesn't know anything and it's better that way. My chest tightened. The name Raymond Nash wasn't unfamiliar. He was the founder of Nash Company Media, one of the biggest partners in my industry. I'd met him once at a corporate fundraiser. He had nodded politely with an odd look in his eyes, like he was silently debating something he couldn't say. I stepped back quietly, careful not to make a sound, and went upstairs. That entire night I didn't sleep. My mother's words echoed in my mind like a whisper down a dark alley. What if Olivia hears? So who was I really? And why had she been hiding it? The next morning I showed up at Avery's office earlier than usual. She was brewing coffee when I came in, her face tensing as soon as she saw mine. She set the mug down and asked, "What happened?" I repeated every word I had overheard, my voice shaking but clear. Avery listened carefully, didn't interrupt, just narrowed her eyes slightly when I mentioned the name Raymond Nash. "You're sure it was him?" she asked. I heard it clearly. Raymond. And my mom said, "You chose your wife and kids." She's never mentioned him before. Avery nodded slightly. "I'll look into it." 3 days later she called me back to her office. As I walked in I saw a black folder on her desk, next to a printed DNA test result. Avery didn't beat around the bush. I had a forensic team cross-check biological markers using records from the hospital your mother used to work at. The results show a 99.8% DNA match with Raymond Nash. I sat down, stunned. A cold draft slipped through the window behind me, making my spine stiffen. I'm his daughter? Yes. And according to administrative records from 1990, Linda Walker was his private secretary for nearly 3 years. During that time he was caught cheating by his wife. Their marriage nearly collapsed. But eventually he went back to his family. And my mother got pregnant with me. Avery nodded. There's a note in a staff log from the archives. Linda Walker resigned suddenly for personal reasons, with no resignation letter and no severance payout. She simply disappeared. I felt like a piece of my childhood had just crumbled. The man I called Dad, who died when I was 15, the quiet gentleman who fixed my bike that summer after 6th grade, was not the one who gave me life. I couldn't wrap my head around the idea that all these years, my mother had watched me grow and never once told me the truth. "What about Raymond?" I asked. "Did he ever try to reach out?" Avery showed me a printed email. In 2012 he sent an email to an old account of your mother's, saying he wanted to support Olivia's college expenses on the condition they wouldn't meet. But Linda never responded. She might have deleted the email. Or she just didn't want him involved in your life. I was silent for a while, then whispered, "She took away my right to know the truth." Avery nodded. "And probably more than that." She opened a financial file. In 2018, a large sum from a personal trust fund registered under Nash's name was transferred into an account under L. Walker. No specific description, just education fund adjustment. I looked at the number, $500,000. Then I understood. The house my mother bought with cash. The new car for Madison. That spa business. It all probably came from there. She used my name to receive money from Nash, then distributed it as rewards to those who betrayed me. Avery placed her hand on the table, eyes serious. "Olivia, you're not just a victim of emotional betrayal. You're the legal heir to a trust fund. And now, someone is trying to keep you from ever touching it. I stared at the DNA test results. The numbers, the percentages, the sample codes. But it wasn't those that choked me. It was the truth buried for 35 years. The truth about who my real father and real mother are. I chose a small suburban villa for that night. A place unlike anything familiar. No memories, no worn shadows. Only warm yellow lights, a pristine white tablecloth, expensive wine, and the quiet clinking of cutlery in an atmosphere so polite it felt suffocating. I sent personal invitations to each person. My mother received a handwritten letter simply stating, "I want to talk one last time as family." I texted Jake, "You said you wanted to make things right. Then come." Madison was invited with a note, "I'm willing to listen if you're honest." As for Raymond Nash, I called him directly. I didn't explain his role at dinner, just said, "I want you there. Not for me, but so you can witness what you missed." I hired a private chef, a technical assistant, and a videographer under the guise of recording a family reconciliation for a personal project. No one questioned it. Everyone thought I had let go, forgiven, moved on. Good. The complacent are always the easiest to break. When everyone arrived, I smiled, greeting each as a host who knew how to please guests. My mother wore an ivory silk dress, her face carefully made up, eyes scanning the room as if assessing whether I was truly stable as rumored. Jake entered wearing the suit I picked out for him last holiday, polished, calm, like he had never betrayed anyone. Madison followed, clutching a small purse, heavily made up eyes unable to hide her tension. And finally Raymond. He arrived right on time in a charcoal gray suit, nodding slightly to each person, quietly like a guest accidentally dragged into a family dinner that had nothing to do with him. We sat down. My mother raised a glass to celebrate the reconciliation. Jake sparked conversation with gentle reminders of old memories, his voice soft like the breeze, speaking to a wife who still loved him. Madison was quieter than usual, occasionally forcing a smile, fingers twisting her glass. Me. I just sat there, smiling at the right moments, nodding enough to keep the atmosphere light. The meal lasted until dessert. When the chef brought out a plate of almond chocolate cake, my mother's favorite, I stood, raised my wine glass, and spoke evenly. "Thank you all for coming. I know we've had many misunderstandings recently. Tonight, I'm not here to blame anyone. I just want to share the truth." All eyes turned to me. I nodded slightly toward the technical assistant. The room dimmed. A large screen lowered silently from the ceiling and played a video. Images appeared. A clinic hallway, Madison and Jake sitting side by side. She placed a hand on her stomach, he leaned down to kiss her forehead. A nurse called out Madison Carter's name. She stood, Jake followed, hand in hand. A cut scene. They exited the clinic laughing and talking. A voiceover, Madison's own voice. "Do you think she'll know?" Jake replied, "Just keep quiet. I'll handle the rest." The room fell silent. Madison turned pale. Jake stared at the screen, jaw clenched. I said nothing. The screen shifted to bank statements with transfer lines bearing my digital signature, but executed by Jake. Then the business license for Evelyn Glow Spa, owner. Madison Walker. Audio clips intertwined. Jake speaking with a bank, Madison arranging lease contracts, my mother on a call saying, "As long as Olivia doesn't find out, anything can be handled." Finally, the DNA test. My name, Raymond Nash's name. Result: highest biological match. I shut off the screen. The dining room lit up again. I looked at each person. My eyes were no longer soft or naive. "Congratulations. You've just witnessed a reality TV-worthy breakup." Jake jumped up. "Olivia, you're overreacting." "You started it," I replied, voice low but sharp as a knife. Madison stammered. I thought you forgave me." I stared into her eyes. "Forgive you for stealing my husband, using my money to open a spa, then lying about that pregnancy?" She opened her mouth to argue, but no words came out. My mother still said nothing. She sat there, face pale. I turned to her, voice gentle. "You said you loved me. But what kind of mother uses the money of the man who abandoned his daughter to provide for another child, and hides my whole life?" Raymond set down his wine glass, speaking. "I'm sorry I didn't protect you. I was cowardly. But from now on, I won't stand on the sidelines." I nodded. I don't need you to be a father. But if you want to make amends, start by being a witness. My mother shook her head. You don't understand. I did it to protect you. I looked at her long and hard. No, you did it to protect your image. Me. I was your hidden asset exchanged for silence. But today I've taken myself back. 3 days after that dinner, Avery and I officially filed a lawsuit at the county court. Nearly 300 pages of documents, including all evidence. Transfer histories, forged signatures, audio recordings, DNA results, and papers relating to the trust fund my mother secretly misused for years. That morning, I left the filing room with a strange calm. No confusion, no anger, just clarity. Everything was now paperwork. No longer private emotions, no longer family matters. This was fraud, embezzlement, deliberate manipulation, and destruction of a person. The same day, a financial regulatory agency sent an investigation notice to Jake's legal office. According to Thomas's report and the independent investigation team I hired, he used a series of shell companies to drain money from both my personal and business accounts. The money passed through 3 layers of accounts before ending up at a bank in Belize under the name Madison Wellness Holdings. That bank had been flagged last year for suspicious money transfers. Jake's transfers there were just the end of a shady financial scheme he had been running for over a year. Madison fell under investigation as an accomplice receiving illegal funds. The spa lease contract for Evelyn Glow she signed was funded by the stolen money from my trust account. Madison also signed multiple partnership agreements with small business associates under financial power of attorney documents Jake forged, pretending I guaranteed the loans. The court classified the case as multi-layered fraud. The severity led to freezing all assets of both of them temporarily for investigation. I received notification from the bank. All joint accounts, including real estate property once registered under our names, were now under freeze orders. When the news leaked to the local press, everything started to boil over. Evelyn Glow Spa took down its sign just a week later. The storefront displayed a notice. Temporarily closed due to legal issues. I didn't visit, but Avery sent me a photo. The glass doors were vandalized with red paint. Someone had written, "A fraud can't hide behind perfume." Jake called me twice. Both times I didn't answer. Then came a text, "Can we talk? You're ruining everything." I just took screenshots and forwarded them straight to my lawyer. As for my mother, Linda Walker, she didn't call. Instead, she sent me a handwritten letter, her handwriting still neat and deliberate, the tone still carefully crafted. "I only wanted what was best for you. I never imagined things would get this far. I hope you understand, I never acted with bad intentions." I read the letter, folded it, and put it in a drawer. No tearing it up. No reply. Not because I still cared. I just needed to keep everything, as evidence of someone who once hid the truth behind a perfect mask of morality. A few days later, my mother was summoned to a state special investigation office to answer questions about funds from the trust established by Raymond Nash for me when I was 12. According to the trust's terms, the guardian had authority to use the funds only for my education and medical needs. But for nearly 10 years, almost 70% of the funds were transferred through 3 different accounts, ultimately landing in a small company owned by Madison. Raymond Nash, as the founder of the trust, was also present at that meeting. I wasn't allowed to attend, but my attorney was there. Avery told me that when the investigator asked my mother why she hadn't told me about the trust, she was silent for a long moment before saying, "Olivia doesn't need more money. She's capable of taking care of herself. Madison, she's weaker. She needs help." Avery recalled the investigator's expression at that comment. No anger, no blame. Just a long, steady look, as if he was seeing right through my mother's 30-year-old mask. That afternoon, Avery took me to the notary's office. I signed an official petition demanding full control of the trust and requested freezing all financial activities tied to assets in my name or related to Madison Walker. When I finished signing, I didn't sigh. I didn't shed a tear. I just sat still, feeling a calmness in my chest, a silence I'd never known after years living in a whirlwind built by others. News that Jake's accounts were fully frozen and that he was summoned a second time by the state financial agency appeared in the papers just a week after I filed for additional prosecution. This time it was no longer an internal suspicion. Investigators publicly charged him with 3 main offenses: contract fraud, identity falsification, and illegal offshore money transfers. I wasn't surprised to see his face in the headlines. That face had been familiar to me for 10 years, now strange and worn, eyes downcast as if all excuses had run dry. Rumors said he could face prison time ranging from 3 to 10 years depending on the final verdict. His law firm cut ties immediately, the restaurant he once managed closed indefinitely, partners canceled contracts, and those who once praised his charm and diplomacy now avoided him as if they never knew him. I didn't laugh. Nor did I feel satisfaction. That feeling had long vanished from me. I only felt clarity. Like a curtain had finally been drawn closed. With Madison, things were more complicated. After the spa was shut down, she almost disappeared from social media. No more bright smiling photos, no more sweet quotes about empowered women. But days after Jake was summoned, a lengthy post appeared on a personal blog. The author claimed to be close to Madison, saying she had a miscarriage from the emotional shock and was just a young woman caught up in someone else's chaotic life. The post spread quickly. Some felt sympathy, others anger. But comments below made the truth clear. She knew what she was doing. Don't use an unborn child to excuse adult crimes. If she's the victim, then what about Olivia? A podcast episode 1 recorded earlier aired right when the miscarriage news broke. Titled "They All Lied," it told my story from beginning to end in my own voice without drama or self-pity. I simply laid out the facts. The betrayal, the financial schemes, the trust fund, the father I never knew, and how those closest to me treated me like a tool. People often say women should keep peace at home, I said in that episode, but they never say what happens when that very home is the place pushing you into darkness. The podcast was shared widely. Some local radio stations replayed excerpts. Women I didn't know emailed me, thanking me for making them feel seen, heard for the first time after years of silence. As for my mother, she stayed off the media. But her name was everywhere in the comments. Mother of the century. Protecting one child by sacrificing another? Linda Walker, you should be ashamed. I don't know if she read all those words. But I know she felt the weight of public opinion. Because just a few days later, I received another handwritten letter, shorter this time. No excuses. Just, you have every right to be angry. But I didn't know any other way than what I did. If I could do it again, I'd still protect Madison. Sorry. I folded that letter and placed it in the same file I call my silent file, where I keep all the apologies that came too late. That night, I sat before the microphone recording the next podcast episode. My voice was steady without peaks. I spoke about the concept of family, and how sometimes it's just an empty shell if respect is missing inside. I told about the feeling of having to prove I wasn't crazy, not imagining things just because someone wanted me to believe I was wrong. And finally, I said something I know I'd waited my whole life to say. I don't need anyone to forgive me anymore. Because I was never wrong. That night, I turned off the lights early. In the dark, I heard the wind brush past the window frame. No message tones. No phone ringing. Just the steady beat of my heart, and a peace I had never known. The house sat on a tree-lined street north of the city, less than 20 minutes drive from where I lived. The first time I saw it was in an old photo my mother slipped between college tuition papers. At the time, I paid it no mind, thinking it was just some place she'd rented or worked at in her youth. It wasn't until Avery mentioned the name on Raymond Nash's inheritance documents that I realized that house once belonged to him. It was where I had been conceived, born, and then left before I even knew I was connected to it. It once belonged to Mr. Nash, then was sold years ago when he officially moved to the coastal area with his family. The house is currently owned by a middle-aged single man who's putting it up for sale because he's relocating to another state. When I came to see it, the owner didn't know who I was. He just said, "Whoever buys this place must have a connection to it. It used to belong to a famous businessman, but he rarely stayed here." I looked up at the beige walls, the slightly rusted iron railing on the second-floor balcony, the uneven stones in the garden underfoot. No detail sparked a clear memory, and it didn't need to. I wasn't here to find something lost. I came to reclaim something that was never given. I decided to buy it without bargaining. The contract was signed in silence. That afternoon, I stood in the empty living room, hearing my footsteps echo on the old wooden floor. I stepped out to the porch, brewed myself a cup of tea, sat down on a wooden chair, and told myself the whole story from start to finish. Not to accuse, not to reopen wounds, but to affirm that I was still alive after it all. Raymond called me a week later. He didn't ask about legal progress or mention the trust fund or podcast. He just said, "I heard you bought the old house." I nodded though he couldn't see me. "I didn't buy it for you." "I know." A short silence. "But if you'll allow me," he said, "I want to apologize. For not speaking up when I could. For letting you live your whole life with unanswered questions." I didn't answer right away. Then I said calmly, "I don't need your apology. I don't live for you nor because of you. I understand. I don't hate you, but I don't forgive you either. I don't need forgiveness to move on. I just need enough space to breathe." He said no more, quietly hung up after wishing me peace. That night, I recorded the final episode of my podcast. The room was quiet, just the soft scratch of a pencil editing the script, the faint hum of the desk lamp flickering in the breeze, and the voice inside me rising after a long journey. "Someone once asked me," I said, my voice steady like a heartbeat, "whether after all this I still believed in family. I don't have a definite answer. But I know one thing clearly. Family isn't blood. It's responsibility. It's presence. It's choosing to stay when the easiest thing is to turn away." I paused, then continued, "I was taught to endure, to preserve, to sacrifice for family. But no one taught me how to protect myself when family is the place that took everything from me. I lived in silence, in doubt, in feeling not enough. But now I am no longer their victim." I stopped the recording, adjusted the audio, then hit publish. The title of the final episode appeared on the screen. Episode 12, I Am the One Who Tells the Story. The next morning, I woke early, made breakfast by hand instead of ordering delivery like usual. Toast with smashed butter, a cold glass of orange juice. I took it out to the porch, watching sunlight filter through the trees in front of the yard. No phone ringing, no packed schedules, no one rushing me. I ate slowly, letting every bite touch my tongue like a reminder. I am here. Whole enough to start again. If you've listened this far, you've probably walked through your own share of pain. So, what do you think? If it were you, would you forgive? Or would you stay silent just to keep a family that's no longer really yours? I don't have all the right answers. But I know one thing. Sometimes to protect yourself, you have to accept letting go of those you thought you couldn't live without. Not because you're cold, but because you choose to love yourself enough not to accept wrong any longer. If you've ever had to hold yourself together under a roof you thought was warm, I hope this story helps you see clearly. You are not alone. Please leave your thoughts in the comments. I will read them. And if you want to continue exploring real stories with me, about family, hidden sides, choices, and courage, please subscribe to the channel. Because the journey to uncover the truth in every family is never easy, but always worth telling.